lane. The only conservative voices brave enough to push back. This is the Conservative Daily Podcast with Joe Otto.
That's what the Second Amendment was designed to do. If you're going to do something to nullify or take away my rights under the Constitution, come get it.
Max McGuire.
When you look at politicians on the left, they need to convince people that they are victims.
A resistance to the resistance. And now your hosts, Joe Otto and Max McGuire.
And welcome back to another edition of the Conservative Daily Podcast. As always, my name is Max McGuire.
And this is Joe Otto.
And if you're watching on Facebook, I don't know why, but for some reason Facebook is still using an old title, so I just changed it. We're not talking about Obama today. We're talking about the craziness that took place over the weekend, the anti-Americanism that's taking root in our country, how these idiot leftist protesters decided to destroy a statue of Frederick Douglass, who was a freed slave and abolitionist. And we're going to talk about just this general lunacy that's taken hold in the left, and we're going to ask whether there's anyone in the Republican Party other than the president who has the backbone, who has the courage to stop them. Because, Joe, what they're doing, it's obvious what they're doing. They're trying to see how far they can push the ball down the field. They're trying to see how much ground they can gain in their culture war before the other side, the Republicans, actually push back and stop them. That's what's happening. And as long as the GOP keeps caving, keeps surrendering to their demands, they're going to keep demanding more. And it's not a slippery slope argument. We're actually on the slide, as we've mentioned on the show. And now they're going after Mount Rushmore. Now they're going after Frederick Douglass, who was an abolitionist. Nancy Pelosi wants to remove Supreme Court justices, their busts from the Capitol. They want to remove state flags. They want to rename military bases. This is getting insane. And the only reason it's gotten this far is because other than the president and a select few in Congress, the GOP are made up of cowards.
Yep.
And they're refusing just to stand their ground. They think that they stand to lose more by standing their ground than they would in pissing off their conservative base. So it's obvious what's happening. We're here because of crazed leftism, but we're also here because of GOP cowardice.
Well, the leftism only got to the place where it can be leftism because of the GOP cowards and other people. But if we actually think about what happened this weekend, you had people that said that they wanted to cancel the 4th of July. And it was on full display on the 4th of July. I actually believe that more Americans spoke their voice through putting fireworks in the air than you could imagine. I mean, they had pictures of Los Angeles and in California of entire areas just covered in fireworks.
Well, we actually have a video of that. So let's go real quick to cut 6.
The past 10 minutes, 15 minutes or so, and there are massive fireworks going off pretty much in every direction that you see here. Jasmine, our local fire departments and police departments have been begging people not to do this, but it seems tonight they are not listening to those calls.
Well, they're putting up new warnings on social media. I mean, they're saying safe and sane are even banned in the majority of cities in LA County, not to mention the city of LA has a ban as well. We know many of the public shows have been canceled, so we've done stories on this. More people have been, unfortunately, setting off illegal fireworks. I mean, it is quite the sight, but this is not supposed to be happening. I mean, you could be fined up to $50,000.
Fined up to $50,000 by being an American. If that is not a display by itself of stick it up your you-know-what, I don't know what is.
Yeah, no, I mean, that was a panoramic. That was literally spanning the skyline of Los Angeles. And you couldn't see a block in that city that didn't have fireworks going off right above them, which was a great sight. I mean, and you hear them saying, oh, they're not supposed to be doing this. This is technically illegal. Not even mentioning the fact that the LA mayor and California as a whole banned fireworks because they didn't want people to congregate, but they still allowed Black Lives Matter protesters to have their rallies. Right. It's the hypocrisy we've been talking about for weeks, that if you're pro-American, there's something wrong with you. And if you go outside, you're trying to kill people. That's their argument. But if you are a Black Lives Matter protester, then all of a sudden the health concerns go out the window and you're allowed to do whatever you want. It's crazy. And we see what's going on where they're vilifying America. I want to throw this up because this was a tweet from Colin Kaepernick. Let's go to image number 2. He put this out yesterday. It says black people have been dehumanized, brutalized, criminalized, and terrorized by America for centuries and are expected to join your commemoration of independence while you enslaved our ancestors. We reject your celebration. We reject your celebration of white supremacy and look forward to liberation for all and a black power fist. Now, just to make sure we set the record straight, I also want to pull up what Colin Kaepernick tweeted on 4th of July back in 2011. Let's throw up image number 3. Happy 4th of July, everyone. I hope everyone has a blessed day. That's what it's like when Barack Obama's president. But the minute Trump became president, 4th of July became a very racist holiday. Very, very racist. It's a joke. It's a sham, right? If these people didn't actually have the power to influence others, we'd be laughing at them. And yet that crazed opinion that 4th of July is a white supremacy celebration is infectious within the Democrat Party.
So can I go back to something really quick? Remember what I said before about foreign interests are actually invading and infecting our country. People that have no understanding about the history or the culture of our country. They don't want to assimilate. They want to come here and destroy. Right? Remember I said that? Who is Colin Kaepernick's girlfriend?
I have no idea who Colin Kaepernick is sleeping with.
So let me tell you who she is. So her name is Nessa. And Nessa is a radio and TV personality. And you would say, okay, well, and ever since he started dating her, he's becoming woke, quote unquote woke, right? So Nessa was born to her father was Egyptian, and her mother was from the Middle East. She's raised Muslim, right? She has 2 brothers. She grew up in Southern California, and that her dad's job took her between California and Saudi Arabia, right? So again, I will tell you that the nexus behind all of what's happening in our country is happening from people who have no history here. Nobody has fought and died here. They're certainly not having any sort of ties to losing anyone during the Civil Revolutionary War, the Civil War, the Vietnam War, any war that we've had over the last 200 years. They're not a part of it. They don't understand the history of this country. So tearing down things and saying that black people are being oppressed, it starts here. It starts with people that are not in our country that just want to divide us as a country. They want to divide us. Just so you know, and this is my feeling, white supremacy is like a pink unicorn. Okay? Now, I'm not saying that you can't find a pink unicorn if you look for a pink unicorn, but it's the equivalent of a pink unicorn. They represent such a small part of what happens in this country. Now, are there issues with bad people in bad positions? Yes. We can look at Chicago. It's a perfect example of that. Over 100 people shot, 14 people killed. Right? That's reality.
Yeah.
New York City, since they, quote unquote, cut back or defunded the police, what happened in New York City? It's back to early 80s numbers. You're talking about...
their shootings are doubling every week, right? It's a horrible trend line to have in New York City, and the left is acting like, oh, we have no idea. Why is everyone all of a sudden shooting each other? What's going on? And they claim it has nothing to do with the fact that they disbanded the plainclothes police unit that actually was the anti-crime unit. I mean, these decisions have consequences. I wanna pull up this because this is a supercut from how the mainstream media portrayed Donald Trump's Mount Rushmore speech. And like in the lead up to it and after it, it's absolutely insane. And it shows that it's not just 1 or 2 people. This is infecting the media itself. Let's go to cut 1.
Donald Trump chose the most grandiose symbol of U.S. imperialism on Earth to usher in a very on-brand, star-spangled spectacle.
The mother of all photo ops, Mount Rushmore. And we know why this president just can't resist going there.
President Trump will be at Mount Rushmore, where he'll be standing in front of a monument of 2 slave owners and on land wrestled away from Native Americans.
We have to acknowledge that Mount Rushmore is sitting on Lakota land.
The place Donald Trump is going to on Friday is stolen land.
He will inevitably and predictably talk about our heritage. In other words, he will talk about he is the protector of white America.
And to indigenous people, Mount Rushmore, with 4 white presidents, 2 of whom were slave owners, is one of those symbols.
Questions have really been raised about Thomas Jefferson in particular, but also George Washington for their holdings of slaves.
It's worth reminding folks that the man who carved the monument behind me had deep ties to the KKK.
There are other issues. The sculptor, Gutzon Borglum, was a supporter of the Ku Klux Klan. That, of course, is something in all the history books.
Mount Rushmore isn't exactly the innocent ode to our founding fathers as described in our textbooks, and it's high time we disrupt that false narrative.
So that was incredible. Like, if you ever have any doubts that there is collusion within the media to make sure that they have a united front against Trump, that should put any of those doubts out of your mind. We just saw every show, every major outlet, MSNBC, CNN, some of the CBS, ABC stuff. We saw all of it. They were all spreading the same BS, that by going to Mount Rushmore, Trump is gaslighting white supremacists, and he's legitimizing stolen land from Native Americans, and he's supporting the sculptor who apparently supported the KKK. No one cares what the sculptor did in his spare time, right? If he supported the KKK, that's horrible, right? But that doesn't mean you tear down Mount Rushmore. I mean, these people hate Mount Rushmore. They hate what it stands for, and they've been searching for reasons to tear it down, right?
No one actually. They hate America.
No one actually had that organic thought that says we need to tear down Mount Rushmore because everyone knows that the sculptor was a white supremacist. No, they looked back in the history for more reasons to justify their hatred for it, right? They're trying to find it in reverse. No one actually cared about that. No one actually cared. It's a beautiful monument, right? I mean, you can go through history and you can look through at all the famous painters and sculptors. You can find something wrong with them. That doesn't mean we're going to be tearing down the Met in New York City or the Guggenheim. It makes no sense. And they admit that it doesn't make sense. They know it doesn't make sense, but they think they can just grab extra because the GOP isn't standing up to it. Trump is. Trump absolutely is. And we have some clips from his speech that we'll play in a little bit. But by and large, the GOP isn't standing up. We'll talk about this in a second.
It's not even the GOP, Max. It's not even the GOP. It's every leader out there, regardless of what side of the aisle you're on, that you're not calling out this madness, right? This segregationist type of environment that's actually being created. And I'm going to tell you again, I'm going to tell everyone that's listening where it came from. It came from foreign interests. Where you go and they have tribal separation, where you go and they separate and segregate Arab Muslims and black Muslims, where you go to areas where overseas they literally separate societies, separate it. They're bringing that to the U.S. right now. They're bringing it to the U.S. And we're watching it happen and we're saying nothing.
All right, well, let's finish up that clip because we have one more clip from MSNBC's Tiffany Cross, who is quickly becoming one of the more radical hosts on the airwaves today. Let's play cut 2.
And so here we are, celebrating the birth of a nation, independence for white men, at a site described by one Native American activist as, quote, a symbol of white supremacy. Trump choosing Mount Rushmore for a 4th of July campaign stop is just like when he chose Tulsa, the site of the 1921 massacre against black Americans, for his Juneteenth weekend rally. It's that cruel, tired, and familiar jab to black, brown, and indigenous people that makes the shrinking MAGA voter feel as big as a 60-foot face of a colonizing slave owner.
And we ignore all the black, brown, Indians. We ignore all of the people that are, by the way, MAGA supporters that support President Trump. Yeah. Tens of millions, if not 150 million people that are just of any race. Just ignore them. They don't have a voice. The only thing that has a voice is this leftist crap, this garbage, these segregationists and racists. These are the racists. These are the racists that let pedophiles buy elections. These are the racists. This person gets on the news and wants to sit here and tell me freedom for the white man. Everything that we have today was a direct correlation of the sacrifices that were made going back 244 years. But no, they want to make it all about racism. You want to know why they want to make it about racism? Because it is now the new dog whistle. The new dog whistle of racism, everything's racist. You owe us reparations. I'm out. And I'm going to tell you something else, Max. I know millions of Americans that will fight up against this. They're getting tired of it. Americans getting tired. They're getting tired of hearing it. You want everything in your life that you didn't achieve is because of racism. Get out of here. Racism exists in our country on both sides of the racial aisle. Both, or all 5, or all 20.
Yeah.
I mean, racism is everywhere. But
the interesting thing is that the left in controlling the universities, which we're going to get to in a second too, the left has now redefined racism actually in academia to say that it is impossible for a black man to be racist because the black man does not have control over the power structure to basically oppress someone. So anyone who is oppressed cannot in turn oppress anyone else. That's what they're claiming, right? So it's infected academia so much, it's infected the universities, that they've actually put it in the textbooks, the definitions, that black people cannot be racist. I want to read a speech that was given by Frederick Douglass. Anyone who doesn't know this, Frederick Douglass was a freed slave. He was an abolitionist. He helped run the Underground Railroad. Brilliant man. I want to read a bit of a speech that he gave. I believe it was July 5th, 1852. He gave the speech in Rochester, New York. I'm not going to read the entire speech because it's very long, but I want to read 2 passages just to get a feel for how he felt about the 4th of July. And the speech, the title of the speech was The Meaning of July 4th for the Negro. That's his title, not mine. Don't get mad at me for using the word. He wrote it. So I want to read these 2 passages. So first, he says, "Fellow citizens, I am not wanting in respect for the fathers of this republic. The signers of the Declaration of Independence were brave men. They were great men, too, great enough to give fame to a great age. It does not often happen to a nation to raise at one time such a number of truly great men. The point from which I am compelled to view them is not certainly the most favorable, and yet I cannot contemplate their great deeds with less than admiration. They were statesmen, patriots, and heroes, and for the good they did and the principles they contended for, I will unite with you to honor their memory." Now that's a freed slave giving a speech about the 4th of July, where the overall message of the speech is that the 4th of July does not honor the actual principles of all men created equal because people are still enslaved. That was his whole speech. But he went out of his way in the first paragraph of his speech to glorify the founding fathers and saying that it's not often that a nation produces so many great men at one time. Now, this is the other part I want to read. Later down in the speech, "What to the American slave is your 4th of July? I answer, a day that reveals to him more than all other days of the year the gross injustice and cruelty to which he is the constant victim. To him, your celebration is a sham, your boasted liberty an unholy license, your national greatness swelling vanity, your sounds of rejoicing are empty and heartless, your denunciation of tyrants brass-fronted impudence, your shouts of liberty and equality hollow mockery. Your prayers and hymns, your sermons and thanksgivings, with all your religious parade and solemnity, are to him mere bombast, fraud, deception, impiety, and hypocrisy. A thin veil to cover up crimes which would disgrace a nation of savages." So he's talking, saying like, yes, these were great men, but until we actually embody that goal of all men are created equal, and until slavery is stricken from the land, 4th of July means nothing. As long as humans are in bondage, 4th of July disgraces the founders and the principles that they fought for. Very powerful speech, very, very historic speech. There's actually a statue up in Rochester where he delivered this speech, commemorating it, because it was such an important speech in the history of the abolitionist movement. I think we have a picture of that speech. Can we throw up image number 1? Oh, sorry, no. Crazy Democrat leftist protesters tore it down this weekend. Sorry, we would have had a picture of it. No, throw it back up. We would have had a picture of this wonderful statue commemorating this great speech saying that 4th of July is racist until slaves are freed. But unfortunately, the crazed and angry, delusional protesters, and I use that word very lightly, decided to tear it down. It's gone. No one knows where it is. They just tore it down and took it away. Frederick Douglass, freed slave, abolitionist, too racist to have a statue commemorating a speech where he demanded that slaves be freed. Otherwise, 4th of July will not be a real holiday. This is the craziness that's taking control of the left. That makes no sense. And yet that happened this weekend.
I'm going to tell you, Max, we are at a place right now where we are headed toward, I said it before, we're headed towards a war. I mean, there was a police officer that was killed yesterday. You heard about that, right?
Yeah, where his last dying words were, "Tell my family I love them."
Yeah.
It was heartbreaking.
Yeah, and yet, where's the outrage? Where's the outrage? Where's the outrage? See, it's justifiable homicide to them. We can just kill whoever we want. You keep talking like that, and the only people that are going to actually get hurt are the ones that are actually these cowards. Which, by the way, that guy then went into the woods and killed himself, right? That happened right after he shot the police.
Oh yeah, the guy. I don't know how he died. I do know that he was found dead. He might have killed himself. That would make sense for a coward like that. No, we live in crazy times. We live in a time where it's fashionable on the left to kill a police officer. It's fashionable to tear down a statue to an abolitionist. Frederick Douglass was a great man, a freed slave, taught himself how to read. Right? He was one of the smartest men of the generation, and he was born a slave. And they tore down his statue in Rochester, New York.
Yeah. I
guess because racism, and the statue was commemorating a speech where he condemned the 4th of July until all slaves were freed, and they still tore it down. It's getting stupider and stupider. This isn't about George Floyd, and it hasn't been for a very long time. Right? This is about chipping away whatever monuments to our past that they can, because the past is inherently racist. It's inherently unjust, even if that past glorifies a freed slave. I'm at a loss. I'm not at a loss of words as I'm talking, but it just makes no sense, right? I can't rationalize why someone would possibly tear down a statue of Frederick Douglass, right? It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, well, nothing that we're seeing makes sense. I mean, every day it gets more crazy every single day. And it does have a lot to do with the fact that leadership won't stand up. And I don't really care if you're a Democrat or a Republican. I don't care. Stand up. And the people that are actually in positions where they're on TV and they're actually able to talk about this, talk about it. And talk about how crazy this small minority is to our entire society. The media is feeding this frenzy. They are feeding a frenzy of a couple thousand people, not the frenzy of the sentiment of hundreds of millions of Americans. No, they're feeding the frenzy by using small groups of people.
Yeah, no, it's actually true.
I can't, Max. I can't even. My mind just cannot wrap its head around how ridiculous everything is, and what we're actually facing as a country. Because it doesn't make sense. It doesn't. It's something that should happen in an undeveloped nation. And that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with an undeveloped mentality, a very immature, right? Lacking just basic common sense, basic understanding of logic, and a sense of entitlement. These are all things that come out of undeveloped nations. These are not things that come out of a developed nation like the U.S., right, with history of 244 years of fighting for our people, side by side, black, yellow, green, purple. It doesn't matter what color you are. Like, our military is one of the most diverse out there. This just flies in the sacrifice of everything. It doesn't even make sense to me. I can't even.
Yeah, well, part of the reason that I wanted to read that part of that speech by Frederick Douglass is because that was in 1852. He was a freed slave. The opinion he had was not given to him by any foreign interest, right? He lived the experience of being a slave. He saw the hypocrisy of celebrating the Declaration of Independence, saying all men are created equal while people are still enslaved, right? That was a homegrown opinion, and he wasn't wrong. The challenge is that now that slaves have been freed, now that we've passed the Civil Rights Act, now that we've passed and ratified the 13th and 14th Amendments, right? Now that we've gone all this way and put so much of that history behind us, there are interests out there still claiming that 4th of July is racist. They're claiming that the discrimination and the racism and the segregation that existed at the time of the Civil War in the antebellum South and in Jim Crow era are still alive and well today. Like, Joe Biden gave not a speech because it was cut up, right? He couldn't even do a speech, so his team just cut up different sentences and put it together in a video. He made a statement on 4th of July demanding that we continue to fight back against systemic racism. And he points to all these instances of the Jim Crow South, of the antebellum South. And it's just a lie, right? You can point to problems in our society, fine. But to say that we are just as bad off now as we were when Martin Luther King was shot, right, or when there were minstrel shows in the South, in the Jim Crow South, right, or when there were lynchings, when the Klan were able to meet and rally, and they were able to control entire towns because they controlled the mayor's office, the school board, right? They had so much power. Today, they've been basically delegated to a joke. When the Klan rallies, it's a joke. No one actually supports them.
Nobody supports white supremacists. Our society has evolved, and it's evolved to a place where we have enough experiences, enough relationships with people of multiple faiths and multiple races, and their interfaith, or excuse me, there's interracial relationships that have happened that have actually melded those communities together in ways that are unbreakable bonds. Yet you still have those that make poor decisions, that go to prison 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times, that say, oh, it's the white man trying to hold me down. Now, I'm not telling you that there aren't white people who are racist. I didn't say that. I didn't say that at all. And nobody would disagree that there are racists, but there are black racists and there are Asian racists. My God, we could have a conversation for 3 days, 10 days, 20 days about the supremacy of Asians and how they feel about white people or black people. Yeah. Actually, what they feel about black people is there are some Asians that it's even worse.
Go to China, it's absolutely true. In China, there were stories a couple weeks ago where African Americans went to sit down in restaurants and everyone just ran away from them because the propaganda being spread in China is that African Americans and blacks are the ones spreading coronavirus. That's actually state propaganda. So people were running away, kicking them out of restaurants. It's very real there, right? We can look at points in our history where we look at people like Bull Connor, who was like a sheriff, a politician of the South, who would literally sick dogs on African Americans when they were out protesting for their rights. You can point to situations like that, but there are no Bull Connors in today's America. You cannot show a situation where a sheriff or police captain has sent dogs, angry dogs, to go eat people, right? It doesn't happen. And to argue that it does belittles the sacrifices made by people like Martin Luther King, or dare I even say Malcolm X, the sacrifices made by people like that who fought for civil rights, right? It belittles that. It belittles all of it to pretend like it never happened, to pretend like we're no better than we were in the antebellum South. It's so stupid, but it's being driven by this ignorance. I want to play this clip before we get to Trump talking. In the last week, a lot of people on the left have been promoting Tammy Duckworth as a potential running mate for Joe Biden. She is they say, a woman of color. She is disabled. She lost both legs in military service. She is someone that you would think would be a perfect running mate for Joe Biden, except here she is opening her mouth saying that we should listen to the people who want to remove the statues of George Washington. Let's play cut 3.
So that might be true, but George Washington, I don't think anybody would call him a traitor. And there are moves by some to remove statues of him. Is that a good idea?
I think we should listen to everybody. I think we should listen to the argument there. But remember that the president at Mount Rushmore was standing on ground that was stolen from Native Americans who had actually been given that land during a treaty. And again, let's talk about the greater context of where we are in our country right now.
It's unbelievable. I mean, for a week, she was one of the leading contenders for Biden's running mate. And now she opened her mouth and said that we should listen to the people who want to tear down George Washington's statue. Now, she's right that the area of land that Mount Rushmore was built on was originally given to the Native Americans. And she is right when she says that after we found gold there, we said, nah, we're going to keep it. Right? We can make that argument and say that that wasn't right to do. But to say that Mount Rushmore shouldn't exist anymore and that we should just hand it back to the Native Americans, then they should be allowed to destroy a national monument. It's just not a real argument. It's not a real argument at all.
No, but the idea is that they want to just complain about everything, that life is so hard in the United States. Well, I have news for you. If it's so hard here and this is such a horrible place, every last one of you needs to take a visit to the other 187 nations out there and see how you like it. Go look at it. You want to transform this into what? Into what? A hole in the ground like exists in most other parts of the country? No, we're not. Why? Why should we? Look, if we want to make improvements to our society, then you make recommendation what those improvements are. You don't self-serve.
Build it up, don't tear it down.
Right, but that's not what they want to do. That's not what they want to do. They want to walk around saying the police are bad. And by the way, I want to say something. There are some things that we need to do to reform our police departments, right, to hold them more accountable. We also need to get rid of profiteering in police environments, such as putting up red light cameras and things like that, which are 100% just designed not to do anything other than grab revenue from the communities. Like those things should happen, right? And I think that one of the reasons why we had the slippery slope of eroded confidence in our communities is because we've allowed for militarization of our police forces. Now, whether or not they need it today or not, I mean, based on what we're seeing, they probably need it. But be given to have them have the ability to create revenue streams for themselves, I think is absolutely wrong, and it feels like extortion to people. And so, I mean, matter of fact, I got an email, and I found it hard to argue with it. They're like, hey, Joe, listen, why is it at the end of the month, statistically speaking, that they do more speeding tickets at the end of the month? And it's because they need to hit, create revenue. And you'd have people say, well, that's not true. And then, but statistically speaking, from the 20th to the end of the month, they generate almost 60% of the revenue for their police departments based on ticketing. That is true statistics. So people have a right to be upset in a lot of different ways, right? For some of the injustice or some of the feelings that they get that they're not empowered to do anything. So part of what we're seeing is that lack of empowerment, but they're also muling in all these arguments that really they fly in the face of everything we are as a country and all of the hard work that we've actually put in order to become a more acceptable or accepting and a more equalized environment. Look, our company, Max, 34% minority, 34%, 71% women. How does that happen? I mean,
how do you have systemic racism when you have their numbers like that? I want to read a comment that just came in that's really funny. Where is it? Debbie Phillips writes in that says Native Americans owned the entire continent. Let's get real. You're right. Yeah, Native Americans used to own the entire continent. And Sherry writes, the Indians were completing bloodshed amongst themselves before the colonists got here. Again, true. There was if you look at the map over time, before the colonists even got here, the Native Americans were killing themselves long before the white man ever showed up to kill them. Right? They were wiping out tribes to gain control of land. So to say that this is like they have eternal right to this land, that wasn't true when they were fighting over it, right? When they were taking it from someone else. And to say that we have to give up any parcel of land because it used to be Native American, as Debbie just wrote in the Facebook comment section, the whole country used to be Native American land, which is why you can see where they're going with this. That's why when they topple a statue to George Washington, they spray paint indigenous land on it because they don't think we ever should have existed to begin with. It's why they've thrown in Baltimore, they threw a statue of Christopher Columbus into the harbor, into the river, or whatever body of water it was. Right? They did that, and the funny thing with that, I'll let you go in a second. The funny thing with that Christopher Columbus statue is that was a federal statue. Ronald Reagan was there in 84, 85. He actually gave the commemoration speech for that statue, and it was basically a celebration of Italian American heritage. So that was a federal statue. So the law that Trump has been citing, where people who destroy it face 10-year minimum prison sentences, that goes into effect for that Christopher Columbus statue. Good. So it's a really interesting dynamic. Go ahead, and I'll let you go.
Yeah, so, I mean, when we talk about the Native Americans and we talk about things that actually happened in history, everyone on this loony left side, right? These terrorists that are saying now you have to give us reparations and free stuff and rewrite history and basically, I mean, frankly, you don't even get to keep your house. I mean, the way that they have it now, we just need to keep giving them whatever they want, make them comfortable so they can go sit on the beaches in Mexico. They don't have to work for anything. But the thing that happens when you actually have a discussion with people about what's really happening in history, here's the two arguments you get. Yeah, but that they still tried to kill us. Or here's the other one. This is even better. That's not true. Okay, well, actually, it is true. And they go, no, it's not true. Thomas Jefferson was a slave owner and a really bad guy, and so was George. they go straight to a detail. It's like It's like reading a book and only reading the forward and saying
not even reading the forward. It's just looking at the picture and then saying, "Oh, that makes me angry. That man was a bad man."
but we constantly eat our own as a society today, and all of it has to come back to. And I just want to say it. It's just because of foreign interests. I mean, they had a group of 7 people, 7 quote unquote white people in Washington, right? That were throwing Nazi signs and lighting off fireworks, right? Did you hear about this? Anybody hear about this?
No.
All right. So it was 7 quote unquote white men in Washington that were arrested for throwing up Nazi symbols to a black family. You didn't see that?
No, I didn't see that. But I have a feeling that usually when those stories come up, they tend to be hoaxes. So I'll defer until that comes out. But I tend to not believe anything like that because there have been far too many cases of black men spray painting swastikas on black churches that I don't even believe those things anymore.
Well, so
I don't believe them anymore.
This was true. This did happen, right? And they were yelling at the police. But the people, these 7 people that were throwing up these signs, there's 7 Russians. They barely spoke English, and they were not citizens of this country. I'm not joking. But do you think the news picked it up? Do you think that's what the news said?
I think that they probably would just say white men.
They said white men.
Kind of like when an illegal alien kills someone, they just say a Hispanic man, or they just say a New York man if he lived in New York. They don't actually mention the immigration realities. Yeah, no, I believe that. I completely believe that.
I'm literally trying to find it again because I was reading about it, and it literally is. I had to dig a little bit deeper, but they are 7 Russians. There are 7 Russian people, or I'm sorry, they're from Ukraine that are not. They're not Americans. They know nothing about our history, and yet they are the example we use for racism in this country, and they're here legally. They're legally here, but they're not Americans.
I would actually challenge that because it's a federal crime to enter this country with the purpose of protesting. So a lot of people on the left didn't know this. People got arrested when Trump was being inaugurated because people from Canada were crossing the border and admitting that they were going to the protests, and they were many of them arrested on the spot because it's a federal crime to enter this country with the purpose of protesting. So if that ends up being the purpose for what they did there, they're going to be in federal hot water as well. I want to play some cuts of Trump's speech from Mount Rushmore. I don't know if everyone watching today had a chance to watch it. Definitely, I'll post a link to our YouTube channel where we posted the entire speech. I'll post that in the comment section. It was probably his best speech ever. If we're being honest, it was probably the best speech of his presidency. I want to play a couple of clips because Trump is so spot on, and the media. First of all, CNN, MSNBC, CBS, NBC didn't cover it live. The only ones that did were Fox News and ABC.
And then they lied about it. And then they lied about it. And they didn't say anything about the unification that he had in his speech. They lied.
Yeah.
And they
said it was dark
the people
and divisive. They said it was dark and divisive. So we have 2 clips of Trump's speech, and then I want to talk about it. So let's go first with cut 4.
1776 represented the culmination of thousands of years of Western civilization and the triumph of not only spirit, but of wisdom, philosophy, and reason. And yet, as we meet here tonight, there is a growing danger that threatens every blessing our ancestors fought so hard for, struggled, they bled to secure. Our nation is witnessing a merciless campaign to wipe out our history, defame our heroes, erase our values, and indoctrinate our children. Angry mobs are trying to tear down statues of our founders, deface our most sacred memorials, and unleash a wave of violent crime in our cities. Many of these people have no idea why they're doing this but some know exactly what they are doing. They think the American people are weak and soft and submissive. But no, the American people are strong and proud, and they will not allow our country and all of its values, history, and culture to be taken from them.
So I thought we had two cuts, but I think the second cut is actually that same cut. So that was part of his speech. I thought that was one of the most powerful parts of his speech. He had a lot of great parts, but talking about how this threat, this merciless campaign to wipe out our history, defame our heroes, erase our values, and then saying they do it because they think the American people are weak, and they do it because they think they've indoctrinated our children enough to get away with it.
It's true.
The reason that stuck out to me was because there was a study, I don't know if you saw this, came out, a poll came out over the weekend. It gets done every year, at least in recent memory, called the Youth Patriotism Index. And it's put out by Young America's Foundation and Town Hall. And really, really interesting numbers. It looked at what high schoolers think about the United States and what college students think about the United States. And I'm just going to read off a couple of the statistics. So high schoolers, 88% of high schoolers view the United States favorably. 91% of high schoolers view the U.S. flag favorably. 63% of U.S. high schoolers are proud of the U.S. 58% of high schoolers say they're patriotic. 85% of high schoolers are glad they live in the United States. And 48% of high schoolers would sacrifice for America. That's high schoolers. I want to read the statistics off for college students because something's happening in this country. The claim that all young people are anti-American, it's wrong, right? This poll shows that high school students have great love for the United States. The problem comes when they go to college. And I'll read this off. So 88% of high schoolers view the U.S. favorably. When it goes to college students, that drops to 69%. 91% of high schoolers favor the flag. That drops to 73% when you talk to college students. 63% of high schoolers are proud of the U.S. That drops all the way to 40% when you go to college students. 58% of high schoolers say they're patriotic. It goes all the way down to 35% when you look at college students. 85% of high schoolers are glad to live in the United States, only 73% of college students. And this is the one that's very, very striking. 48% of high schoolers would sacrifice themselves for America so that the flag can go on. 48%, almost 50-50. It drops all the way down to 32% of college students. 32%. Less than a third of college students are willing to sacrifice for America. Yeah, it's obvious that there's something going on in colleges that's doing this because the parents are raising their kids right, it seems. Oh, it's the colleges that are leading them so far astray.
Max, my son tells me every day. My daughter used to tell me every day. My daughter just graduated from college. My son is in college now, and he says, Dad, you do not understand what they're doing, what they say, how they say it. They hate, they literally, there are professors out there that hate America. They just hate them. And it's a constant barrage of guilt that they try to make people feel.
Yeah.
Some of the classes that they make people take at these universities is absolutely abhorrent. It's crazy what they're actually having these kids learn. Right? And the kids, because they're in a university and they're like, well, I'm supposed to be learning this. Maybe I was just wrong all those years. It's infecting their minds because parents don't have the ability to search into or see what these college professors are teaching their kids.
Yeah. There was, when I went to college, there was a group, it was called AHANA. And it was Asian, Hispanic, African, and Native American. I think that was what it was. It was basically all that. There's a new acronym now that I just learned about. I didn't even know about. It's called BIPOC. Have you ever heard of BIPOC, Joe?
No.
BIPOC stands for Black, Indigenous, and People of Color. BIPOC. I never even heard of that. I thought that, I don't know why they keep inventing acronyms. Apparently the old acronym was too racist. Fine, whatever. BIPOC. They're the ones who are segregating.
Yeah.
Right? When you have clubs on campus, when you have groups on campus that are exclusively what they call Black, Indigenous, or people of color, and no white person is allowed to join, right? That's the echo chamber. It's not everywhere else. It's in these racist clubs.
So let me just tell you something else about racism. All right, this will blow your mind, and maybe people will understand this. Maybe, I mean, if you do, just say so in the comments or you can call. But if you've ever been, so I've been to India, the amount of racism in the caste system that happens there would blow your mind, right? If you go to the Middle East, the amount of racism that exists in the Middle East against black people, they do the same thing to black people there. See, in the Middle East, if you're a black person, you are cleaning their laundry, right? You are beaten with twigs. You are treated horribly. In Saudi Arabia,
it's modern day slavery. Yeah,
and it is, and it still happens to this day. I mean, I'm talking massive amounts of slavery.
Yeah.
For those of us that have actually traveled all over the world, that have been to places, you know what it looks like. You know what racism looks like. And the amount of it is staggering in these other countries. These other countries, the way that they keep in power, the way that they actually control the masses is by using segregation as a tool. And now in the United States, they are indoctrinating, and they are doing that exact same thing to the people here in the United States. They are segregationists. They are racist. The people that are calling and screaming race or racist, those are the people you need to look out for. Those are the people that really are taking away everything we stand for as a country, and they're going to bring that crap hole mentality that they have over there. They're going to bring it here. And by the way, you can sit here and say India is not a cesspool. All right, so then you've never been to India. Oh, it's beautiful. I saw pictures. Well, you've seen pictures of Cuba too, and I promise you, I've been to Cuba.
We talked about that. We don't need to. Cuba's a shithole. We know that. Oh no! Now I curse. Now we have to be explicit. What is that a curse? I don't know. The president said it. Does that make it a curse? Whatever. I want to go because I thought these were the two same cuts, but I think the actual second cut is different. I want to play this. This is cut 5. This is the second cut from Trump's speech. Let's play cut 5.
Our people have a great memory. They will never forget the destruction of statues and monuments to George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, Ulysses S. Grant, abolitionists, and many others. The violent mayhem we have seen in the streets and cities that are run by liberal Democrats in every case is the predictable result of years of extreme indoctrination and bias in education, journalism, and other cultural institutions. Against every law of society and nature, our children are taught in school to hate their own country and to believe that the men and women who built it were not heroes but that were villains. The radical view of American history is a web of lies. All perspective is removed. Every virtue is obscured. Every motive is twisted. Every fact is distorted. And every flaw is magnified until the history is purged and the record is disfigured beyond all recognition.
So that's what the mainstream media called hateful and divisive speech. Hateful and divisive, to criticize the indoctrination of our children. They think it's hateful and divisive because they've been allowed to get away with it for this long.
Right.
They've been allowed to get away with it without the president calling them out. That's why they find it hateful, because they know that he's targeting them, right? He's targeting the New York Times with their 1619, isn't that their thing? Trying to rewrite history. It's full of lies about slavery, trying to gin up racial anxieties in the country, full of lies. But now that's being pushed into our schools. They're mad because he's going against them. He's going against CNN airing their BS coverage. He's going against them because it's not just schools; it's also television. That's why they're calling it dark and divisive, because he's actually pulling the rug out and letting everyone see the cockroaches that have just been huddling in the kitchen all this time and no one even knew were there. He's lifting up the rug and revealing it to the world. That's why they're angry at him. I
don't, I mean, I listen to it and I get really excited, and I know that there are millions of people that listen to CNN, and they didn't get to hear it, right? They didn't get to hear it. They didn't get to see it because they said, hey, we're not. And by the way, if you're not going to actually let people think for themselves, air it to the American people, that should show you something. That by itself should show you what they're about. It should show you that they want to indoctrinate you, that they want you to think the way they want you to think, that they want to own you. They want to enslave you. That's what this is. Ultimately, they're doing everything they can, like the devil that they are, to indoctrinate you, to change your mindset, to create this selfish and they want you to lose your grip on personal accountability. They don't want you to see reality for what it is. And they keep you blinded by this just barrage of indictments of character that are not true. So then when something falls down in your life, that you can say, I didn't do it. It wasn't my fault. They did that because I was black. They did that because I was Hispanic. They did that because I was white. You know what? Take responsibility for your own life. Take responsibility for the things that you do in your life. Because if you can't take responsibility for the things that you do in your life, frankly, no amount of entitlement that's given to you is going to change who you are as a person. It's just not going to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you're right. It's amazing that CNN, MSNBC had someone there at Mount Rushmore for pre-event coverage. Then they didn't air it. And then they had people there for post-event coverage telling you what happened, right? But you're not allowed to see what happened. Not allowed to see what he said. We're going to cut up little bits and pieces, smaller than what we just played. We just played entire paragraphs. CNN, MSNBC, all these mainstream media outlets were cutting up like half of a sentence, right, to try and take it out of the context, to twist it, to say it's dark and divisive. They don't want you to see what Trump said, which is why I posted it in our Facebook live stream. I'll post it in our YouTube live stream as well. Go and watch the speech if you haven't already, because it was easily one of the best speeches, if not the best speech of Donald Trump's presidency, hands down. He said everything he needed to say. He spoke out in defense of the Second Amendment. He mentioned the fact that all children, born and unborn, are made in the image of God. It was a hands down excellent speech. And he spoke for a long time. He spoke for like 40, 41, 42 minutes. And to see the mainstream media pick it apart into 10, 15, 20-second clips and say, oh, it's so dark and divisive, to hear how they made the claim that Trump spoke the entire time about how much he loves Confederates. Just a lie. I mean, it's not true. Not like the bulk of it was talking about the Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, Teddy Roosevelt, and Abraham Lincoln. That was the bulk of his speech, because he was going through the histories of all four men because they were behind him. To say he was glorifying Confederates the whole time was a complete lie. But that's what the mainstream media does. They spin it. And in order to do so, they have to stop you from seeing the truth, which is why Trump tweets. People don't like that he tweets. But if he doesn't tweet, they're just going to take his comments out of context. He has to have an unfiltered way to speak to the people.
And it used to be that in the press room, they would ask questions about, all right, how does the president feel about this, or what's he going to do about this?
Yeah.
Now they just spend all of their time in this Trump derangement syndrome environment where they're like, well, tell me why President Trump didn't come out and denounce the Confederate flag. Well,
yeah.
Why would, so I'm sorry, everything he doesn't do is he's held responsible for, and all the things he does do, you don't give him credit for it. I mean, it literally is it's the sickest display of the deep state that I could possibly give you, because now the deep state is just spreading. It's spreading.
Yeah. Well, the dumbest statement out of all, there have been a lot of really dumb questions from these press briefings. The dumbest one I heard, at least in the last couple of weeks, was one of the reporters asked Kayleigh McEnany if Donald Trump wishes that the Confederacy had won the Civil War. That was a question. That was a question asked in the press briefing at the White House. Does the president wish the Confederacy had won?
Yeah.
Donald Trump isn't a southern good old boy. He was raised in Manhattan. Right? He's not a southerner. To say, I wish the Confederacy won. He's the president of the United States. He wishes that the Confederacy won. It's insane. It's insanity. They're hoping to get a soundbite that they can use to push that narrative. They're hoping they can trip Kayleigh up, and thank God she's up there, because she's doing an excellent job. And she dodges and weaves and she circles back around where she needs to. but a lesser press secretary would have fallen to a lot of those traps. So thank God she's there. But that's what the media does. They try and lay these traps to try and hope that the president or his press secretary slips up enough to fall in them. Well, that's going to wrap it up for this episode. Any final words, Joe?
I have so many final words. We could go on for another hour just talking about my final words, but I think the final words here are, if not you, who? And if not now, when? We are at that critical place in our country where our leaders have to stand up. And I think that's one of the things we're going to have to start doing, Max, is just talking about people standing up more, right? And what that means, not just writing letters, but showing up, right? And being a part of the solution, even if it means that you have to sacrifice or a little bit of your time or even put something at risk.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely true. My final word will be, make sure that if you're on Parler, make sure you follow us at Conservative Daily, all one word. We're on Parler. If you follow us, we'll follow you back. Check us out there. If you're not on the platform yet, definitely go over there, because it's only a matter of time before Facebook and Twitter start banning more conservatives. Better to get on there and get your accounts built up before that ban hammer comes. Well, that's going to be it for this edition of the Conservative Daily Podcast. Remember that you can download the podcast on Apple Podcasts if you have an iPhone, or on the Google Play Store if you have an Android phone. You can also find us on the Podbean app, as well as conservative-daily.com/podcasts. Please do make sure, even if you watch us on Facebook or on YouTube, make sure that you subscribe to the audio version too, because it really helps us as we try and grow the show. So again, my name is Max McGuire.
And this is Joe Otto.
And remember that the fight to take back our country is not over, but the only way we win is if we all stand and fight together.